And you're listening to The Big Questions. I'm your host, Robert K. Elder, and our guest is Brayden King. He's associate professor at Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. And today we are going to talk about bias, among other things, and reputation management. The Big Questions is part of the Sun Times Media local podcast network, and our sponsor is Shure Microphones, SHURE.com. And Brayden, one of the reasons we're here is recently you and your associate wrote about bias, and bias in terms of baseball. And one of the things that is interesting is umpire bias. And umpires, by definition, are supposed to be impartial. But because they're humans, we figure there's bias. But what I was really interested in with your article is they were biased in very specific ways. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we were interested in studying umpires because this is a setting where if you're going to see objectivity, you should see it here. Umpires have huge incentives to be fair and call an accurate strike zone. Mm-hmm. So we looked at umpires calling the strike zone, and we tried to figure out when do they make mistakes. So a mistake would be, a non-swinging pitch. The umpire calls a ball when it was actually a strike.
Right.
Or the umpire calls a strike when it was actually a ball. And we found that those kinds of mistakes happen about 14% of the time, which to us was surprising. I mean, we thought, they're going to make mistakes, but it should be less than 10% of the time. Over more than 1 out of 10 pitches, non-swinging pitches, is called wrong.
And I'm just interested about the impact of that. So, this comes out. I know it got a lot of conversation on sports radio in particular, but is this something you think people already knew, or what was the conversation?
So, in some ways, it's not surprising that umpires are making mistakes. I mean, they're humans just like all the rest of us. I think what's surprised people is that some of the findings confirmed long-held expectations, but things that we couldn't prove. And then some of the ways in which umpires are making mistakes are kind of baffling. Like they don't occur in the way that you might expect.
So give me one of those examples.
So, for example, umpires tend to get worse. They make more mistakes in the most important parts of the game. So the baseball statistic is leverage. So when you're in a high leverage situation, that means the outcome of the at-bat matters more to the outcome of the game, right? Mm-hmm. So you would expect that in those situations, when there's more on the line, that the umpire is going to get better, right? Because the umpire will be paying closer attention to what's going on. Mm-hmm. But what we found is that in those situations, umpires actually make more mistakes.
And why?
Well, that was the baffling part. It's not exactly clear. You would think that they would be paying more attention, therefore they would get more accurate. It could be that, like a lot of us, they just, when they're under pressure, they tend not to see things as well as they think they do.
But is it part of like the very human part of us that wants there to be more drama? Do they, are they are they contributing to the drama of the game?
Maybe. I mean, there's some evidence to suggest that's true. I mean, we know that we've also found that when you get into the at bat, or to the bat count gets higher, they tend to prolong the at bat even longer. Mm-hmm. So in an 0-2 count, the umpires are much more likely to make a mistake in calling it a ball, right? So they're more likely to mistakenly call a ball. And when it's a 3-0 count, they're more likely to mistakenly call it a strike. And so that suggests that, they're unintentionally or intentionally prolonging the at-bat, perhaps, to add drama, add drama to the moment.
I was going to say, because umpires, no matter how impartial they are, they're still baseball fans, and
they understand the performance of the game. And you could see this, some of their dramatic gestures when they call a strike. It's not just strikeout. It's, big arm movement, strikeout.
Yeah. It's part kabuki.
Yeah, they recognize that they're part of the performance of the game. So maybe that's playing into it as well.
Two of the other factors that were really interesting was you found that race played a factor in an umpire expanding the strike zone. Can you explain that?
So race, in particular, being an African American, causes umpires to expand the strike zone. So they're 10% more likely to call a mistaken strike in favor of a white pitcher than they are against an African-American pitcher. So it's not as if they're shrinking the strike zone or squeezing the strike zone for African-American pitchers, but they are expanding it a little bit more of the time for white pitchers.
Sure. And so is there any explanation for that?
By the way, we also found that to be true for pitchers who had Hispanic last names. So the same as, Hispanic pitchers also seem to be they're not getting a bigger strike zone. I don't know. I mean, what we know from other research is that race always seems to matter in some way when you're talking about bias. So some colleagues did a study a couple years ago looking at NBA officiating, and they found that NBA officials tend to call more fouls against players of the opposite race. And so maybe that's part of what is going on here. There are more white umpires than there are black umpires. It could just be that the white umpires are slightly more biased in favor of the white pitchers, and that's what's explaining the effect.
Sure, but it seems almost as if we're saying that there's like some weird affirmative action for minority pitchers. Is that right?
Against minority pitchers, yeah, because they're expanding this. They're calling more mistaken strikes for the white pitchers. So it's working in the way that sort of continues to make it harder for an African American to get ahead in the game. So we don't think it's intentional. I mean, I don't believe that the umpires are going into the game thinking, I'm going to make it harder for an African American pitcher to get a strikeout or to get a strike call in this situation. It just seems to be like a lot of the things we're finding, that there are these unconscious decisions that we make, and whatever preconceived notion we have oftentimes gets translated into our decisions in this really important decision.
Sure. And then the last one, which figures into the rest of your research, is the stature and reputation of the pitcher.
Yeah. So this is the probably one of the bigger effects. It was one of the bigger effects in our regression, our analysis. We found that that all-star pitchers get a bigger strike zone than non-all-star pitchers, and non-all-star pitchers tend to get squeezed more than all-star pitchers. So an all-star pitcher is much more likely to get a strike call when it's actually a ball. And a non-all-star pitcher is more likely to get a ball called when it's actually a strike. So the umpires are making mistakes, but they're making them in ways that tend to favor the all-stars. So a 5-time all-star is getting an advantage, about a 15% advantage over a pitcher who's never been an all-star before.
So literally their reputation precedes them.
Yeah, so we call that the sort of the status effect. And the reputation effect that we found is that pitchers who are known for being able to sort of command the strike zone, so they are known for being able to locate the pitch where they want it to go. We call those, control pitchers. Those pitchers also tend to get a bigger strike zone. Or I should say they're actually more likely, especially likely to not get squeezed and have real strikes called balls. So a pitcher like, Greg Maddux, is known for being able to pinpoint the location of that pitch whenever he wants to. They tend to get the benefit of the doubt over pitchers who are not known for having that kind of command.
So with all of this research, so much is computerized now. There's in the NFL, you see that yellow line for where the God, I'm losing the word for it. For the first down marker. So why not? What do you think a computerized strike zone would do for baseball?
Well, so who knows if it would do anything? I mean, what we do know that it could do is that it could make the strike zone more uniform. So the technology is there. You could institute a uniform strike zone by simply replacing the home plate umpire for strike ball calls with a computer strike zone. You would just simply have to use the technology to adjust the strike zone for the height of the batter, right? So that it actually fits the dimensions of the batter. But you could do that. I mean, that's how that's what they do. So they come up with the data that we use for our study.
Yeah, you can see it online. For those of you who can't catch a live game, you can catch it on MLB.com.
Right. Yeah. You watch GameCast and sort of follow exactly where those pitches are because they already have this technology in place. Tennis uses it, for example, to call whether a ball was outside or inside the line. Soccer uses it now to determine if a ball actually goes inside the net to call it a goal. So before a soccer official calls goal, he actually has some sort of vibrating glove that it's the computer telling him that it was a goal. So you could do the same thing with baseball. The question I think is, do we want to? And maybe more people are happy with the human element of the game than are unhappy with the favoritism for all-stars.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I mean, just as a baseball fan yourself, what do you prefer?
Well, I don't know. I'm torn. I really like the drama.
Mm-hmm.
I like the uncertainty in some ways, unless it goes against my team, and then I get mad, right? And I'm like everyone else, and I think, oh, why don't we have a computerized strike zone? So I think one of the things that this study has done for me is actually made me more likely to support seeing this kind of change, simply because I recognize that there are systematic biases.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that umpires are inaccurate. I mean, we've always known that.
Sure.
And some umpires are more inaccurate than other umpires.
Mm-hmm.
But what our study shows is that umpires are actually systematically, favoring certain kinds of pitchers. So yeah, it would be nice and doable to have a uniform strike zone that would get rid of some of those biases.
Well, what I'm interested in is also just the technology that's being developed around this. There's also a company now called CompuBox where they go in and they could go in and just rescore a round. So you go into a George Foreman or a Sugar Ray Leonard fight, and they can literally tell you how many punches landed. So so what we might have in the next few years is sort of retroactive.
This is who really won that match.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's a very interesting time to sort of, be a sports fan. So I also wanted to ask you, what is the Matthew effect? You talked a little bit about the Matthew effect.
Yeah. So the Matthew effect is in the title of our paper, and it's really a sociological theory about advantages and disadvantages and how they accumulate over time.
Sure.
So there was a sociologist in Columbia who was taught at Columbia in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s named Robert Merton. He's the father of the famous economist Robert Merton. And he was studying Nobel Prize winners. And he wanted to figure out why Nobel Prize winners seem to develop such fame and how that allows them to sort of reproduce their stature in the field. Mm-hmm. And he argued that Nobel Prize winners simply get more recognition for their accomplishments than non-Nobel Prize winners. So you take one study, you have two authors on one study. One is a Nobel Prize winner and the other one is not. And the Nobel Prize winner gets all the fame and glory for that study, and the non-Nobel Prize winner is forgotten in history. Right? And so with the recognition comes more opportunities, more resources, more chances to do good work in the future. And so he argued that it becomes much easier for high status people who have all the fame and the attention, to do good things in the future, to reproduce their position in their field. And so, and that's called the Matthew effect. Why? Because it comes from that scripture in the book of Matthew in the Bible about,
you're going to have to quote it to me. I'm not that big of a scholar.
So I'll probably get it wrong, but it's something about unto him who has been given much shall be given more, and him who has not shall be taken away. And that is clearly not what Jesus intended when he said that. But, the basic idea is that somebody who has a lot finds it has a lot of status, finds it much easier to reproduce all of his or her advantages than someone who does not. So, we're looking at baseball and we're saying that, it's actually easier for all-star pitchers to perform at a higher level because they're given these opportunities. They're given a little bit of favoritism by the umpires.
Sure. And I want to talk about reputation in just a minute here, but I'm interested in the response you've received from umpires and Major League Baseball.
Yeah, so Major League Baseball has remained silent about this, but I know people around baseball are definitely talking about the issue. Last week, Mike Schmidt, a former, a Hall of Famer actually, a former player for the Phillies, came out and said that he thinks in 10 years, baseball strike zones will be governed by a force field. And what he meant by force field is a computerized strike zone. Right, so we won't need the umpire anymore. So if a Hall of Famer like Mike Schmidt is saying this, then clearly it's getting talked about and it's getting some legitimacy in those circles. No MLB umpire has said anything about the study that I'm aware of, but I got lots of irate tweets from umpires around the country who were asking me if I had ever umpired in my life. And, do you know how hard it is? How hard you're making our job by publishing this research?
Well, so now you can answer. Have you ever umpired a game?
So never baseball. My son plays baseball, and he's a baseball umpire for like 8-year-olds.
Sure.
But when I was in college, I did high school football officiating.
Right.
So I did it for like a year, and it's tough.
It's this more dangerous. You end up with pissed off parents walking you to your car.
High school football officiating has to be the most dangerous kind of officiating there is. So I did freshman games, and I thought, freshman games, no one's going to care. You know, it's just basically a scrimmage. But parents were coming out of the crowd. They were yelling and screaming, and coaches, were having to hold parents back. And this is not like I was a terrible official. It was just that this is sort of the typical reaction.
This was Friday Night Lights living up to his. Exactly.
So even though I don't know what it's like to be a baseball umpire, I know it's being an official of any sport is pretty hard.
Well, so if Major League Baseball is not responding to this, this leads to your other area of expertise, and that is reputation.
Yeah.
So what do they risk, or what do companies risk if they don't participate in any sort of reputation management?
Well, I think what companies worry about is that something is going to, or what they should worry about is that something really bad will happen that will cause their fans, their customers, their investors to criticize them and say, why weren't you thinking about this beforehand?
Right.
I mean, most companies that have experienced some sort of major reputational crisis put themselves at risk in some way, right? So they weren't thinking of all the things that could possibly go wrong, and they weren't planning for those kinds of risks. And, in particular, speaking of MLB right now, the risk is that, you do have like some major blown call in a World Series game that, costs one team the game. And people say, well, wait a minute, you should know that umpires make mistakes in this way. People have written about this, and you have the technology to fix it. Why haven't you fixed it yet? Mm-hmm. So I don't foresee something like that happening this year, but eventually there's going to be a major blown call that will cause people to question MLB and maybe get them to rethink the practice.
Sure. I'm interested in companies in general. When you have, a company in turnaround, or, a company that just has had some, I don't know, tarnishment is not a word, is it? They've been
Sure. Let's go with that.
They've been tarnished in some way. Can they afford not to address it anymore? Like, after Tylenol and the scandal in the 80s, I'm just wondering about this. And I think, was it U.S. Airways? They had a social media mishap.
Total disaster.
Yeah. So what do you risk if you are a company and you don't address your reputation?
Yeah. So the U.S. Airway one example is interesting, but probably it's not going to hurt them in the long term because people will just think, well, that was a snafu.
Yeah, it looked like sort of an honest
mistake,
bad mistake.
But somebody probably got fired, but nobody is holding that company deeply responsible for pictures that were posted on Twitter about them.
Right.
But yeah, companies, increasingly have to deal with all kinds of agitation and discontent from customers, investors, or communities who are unhappy with something that they're doing, because information is so much freer now. Mm-hmm. And we live in a society where anybody can organize a boycott by just tweeting something online, or by, starting a Facebook group just because they don't like, Domino's Pizza for some reason. It doesn't cost a lot to organize people to hate a company. And so because of that, companies are always at risk of, dealing with some major discontent among their constituents, and they have to be much more proactive, I think, than they have been in the past.
And is that just a cultural change? Like, if you are a major corporation, you have to care at a certain point? What are the dangers of not caring? I'm just wondering about the corporate shift.
Yeah. Well, one of the cultural changes that has taken place is that people are much more likely to, mobilize as activists today than was true in the past. So if you go back and look at the number of boycotts that happened in the 1950s, there weren't that many. But if you look at the number of boycotts that occur, today from the 90s on, it's just been this acceleration of boycotts where, now you'll have, 100 or so different boycotts against companies in a single year. So consumers and investors and communities have sort of changed their mindset about companies. They think that they have much more they should be able to hold the companies responsible for anything and everything. And in turn, companies are much more aware that they have to be proactive and not just reactive to this, right? So something like a corporate citizenship office didn't exist 20, 30 years ago, whereas today it's pretty common, maybe uniformly common among Fortune 500 firms.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm interested in this also in just how it changes media culture as well. So, if you're in the media, we report on this, but we are also brands ourselves.
Yeah.
So give me advice. Give me advice about, how media companies have to act differently in this new climate.
So you can't wait for people to define who you are. Like, you can't wait for your customers to say, you're this kind of company. I think they have to be much more proactive today than they've ever been in defining their identity and what they want people to think about them. And the same is true not just for companies, but for us. So you mentioned, like, what would I say to you? One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is this exact thing. I'm writing a book with a colleague of mine, Esther Hargitay, in communications about online reputation management. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to, explain to undergrads, graduate students, and professionals, young professionals, what they should be doing online to make sure that their reputation is a positive one. And
why you shouldn't be putting keg stand photos on Twitter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is that most people think, okay, reputation management, now we're talking about people, not companies, right. But most people think reputation management, well, that means I'm not going to post dumb pictures on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely true. You definitely
let's start there.
Should not be posting dumb pictures of yourself, drinking Jello shots on Facebook.
Sure.
But, you should also be thinking about, what do I want people to think of me? What kind of reputation do I want to have as I go out into the job market for the first time? For example, if you're an undergrad, they're going to be on the job market for the first time ever in a couple of years. And companies don't, just check resumes anymore. When I talk to my MBA students about this, I'll say, what do you do when you get someone's application? What's like if you're interested in the application, what's one of the first things that you do? And they all say the same thing. They Google the person.
Right.
They want to, and they're Googling to see if they have a Twitter account or if what they're saying on Instagram. And so if there's nothing there, so if a person has no, online presence at all, then that is worrisome as well. Right. Because then an employer might say, well, does this person have any kind of selling point, right? Is there any kind of charisma behind this person?
What's their digital footprint? Are they selling themselves?
Yeah. Are they? Is this the kind of person who I can see being a leader inside of our company? And if there is no online persona, if there is no digital footprint, then maybe they'll go with somebody else. Mm-hmm. You're going to go with the person who sticks out, the person who does have something to say about him or herself.
So I'm interested in the conversations that come out of this, with your MBA students. So what do they say? What are the arguments you get into?
Well, it's funny. Some of them, truly get it. And a lot of them, especially those that have worked in the media industries in the past, are very aware of this and have been careful about sort of, crafting some kind of online persona. They have a LinkedIn account at the very least. Well, all MBA students have LinkedIn accounts.
Sure. I think they come out of the womb with a LinkedIn. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's programmed in now. But a lot of them are still very risk averse. Mm-hmm. They're very cautious because they're more worried about screwing up than they are concerned about the potential gains that can come from having a very, an outstanding online presence. But I think there are some costs from being too cautious. The cost being that if it comes down to you and a competitor, and the thing that seems to distinguish your competitor is that they look fantastic because they're doing all these, they have a lot to say, right? They look interesting. They look like the kind of person you'd want to be around in the workplace. Mm-hmm. Then that person's more likely to get the job.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's your next book, Social Media Bias.
Yeah. There you go. That's the title. I should talk about that. Yeah. Good point.
So our guest has been Brayden King. Our music is by Hernan Sanchez. Brayden, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Glad to do it.